this is not the only crisis that we're dealing with right now. We have the health crisis of everyone trying to stay healthy. There are some other crises going on in the church, and one of them is the Eucharist, right? So a year and a half ago, a survey comes out that 75% of Catholics, those who would come here and sit in the church, identify themselves as Catholic, do not believe that Christ is truly present in the Eucharist. And I think that is
scary.
It's very scary.
Yeah.
Talk about a real crisis. And we were talking earlier about, I wrote about this several weeks ago. Can you imagine if the church responded to that crisis the same way that we have the current crisis? I mean, we closed down our churches and people could not go to confession. There were some dioceses. You could be dying and not even be able to receive the last rites of the church, the sacrament of the sick. Mm-hmm. Absurd that we would let people die without the sacraments. People unable to attend funerals for their loved ones. But you go into some of our churches now and they look like Walmart, right? Or they look like banks. You have plexiglass walls set up, stickers all over the floor. They don't resemble the sacred places of worship that they were intended to be. Could you imagine if we responded with such fervor, with such energy, and such diligence to the crisis of the Eucharist? But in the last year and a half since this happened, what has been done? We have not anything. We have not increased, and I shouldn't say nothing. I mean, I think some parishes, some priests, some bishops are doing what they can in their parishes or their dioceses. But how are we collectively addressing this crisis? Because I think we're not.
Yeah.
And I think we're allowing the crisis of the pandemic to add to the crisis of the Eucharist. Some people believe, or at least were given the impression, because churches closed down, because our bishops and our priests were not fighting to keep churches open. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can go to Walmart, you can go to Home Depot, but you couldn't come to church.
Well, I think it really goes into the sentiment of what many people actually believe the Eucharist to be. Mm-hmm. Because if the priests and the bishops aren't adamant about keeping the churches open because of the sacraments, then as the ladies, the people in the pews, what are you to believe?
We communicated that the faith is not essential.
It's not essential. Yeah.
And that, I think, is the greater crisis to come out of this pandemic, is that our church leaders did not fight to communicate.
Yep.
And it was one thing if we fought for it and lost.
Sure.
But it came across that, we're not even fighting for this. And I've had conversations with priests and they say, oh, it's our job to keep people healthy, keep people safe. Well, yeah, that's everyone's responsibility. We're not trying to get anybody sick. But our job as priests is to get people to heaven.
Yeah.
That's our job as priests. We're not doctors. We're not in the medical profession. As humanity, we should all be working to keep everyone safe. Absolutely. I'm not trying to say that that's not part of our human responsibility. Our responsibility as a priest, as a bishop, is people's spiritual lives, their spiritual health, is to get them into heaven. And I think in the pandemic, while we saw some novel ideas, some people doing some great things to try to stay relevant, stay in contact with their people, overall, I think we failed at caring for people's spiritual needs. And it's discouraging.